Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2019 Chevy Trax, we're going to be showing you how to install the Curt Trailer Hitch Receiver. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure that this is going to be the right hitch for you. So when it comes to the Chevy Trax, you know, people use these SUVs to do a little bit of everything. It seems like using hitch-mounted accessories, particularly bike racks, are pretty popular. And so having a hitch back here is going to allow you to do that. And if you ask me, having a hitch-mounted bike rack sure beats dealing with trying to stuff it in the back of your vehicle, or even dealing with the roof rack system and having to reach above your head and put the bike up there. So having our hitch back here is going to open up our opportunities on what we can do. When it comes to the appearance of the hitch, I actually think it looks pretty decent. Kind of sits further back and up nice and tight against the bottom of our car, so it looks right at home. With that said, this is going to be a class 1 hitch, and so it's going to have that 1.25" by 1.25" receiver tube opening. I am a fan of the collar. You know, it just offers a little bit of extra support. I think it kind of makes the hitch look a little more complete as well. And it is going to use that standard 1/2" pin and clip. Keep in mind though, pin and clip do not come included. But if you need one, not really a big deal. You can grab one here at eTrailer. Safety chain openings are going to be a plate style, and they're actually pretty big. So you'll be able to use just about any size hook that you might have. Let's go ahead and just grab a couple of measurements, and these will help us figure out what type of accessories to get. If you go from the ground to the top inside edge of the receiver tube opening, that's going to be about 11 inches. So if it were me, I would get an accessory that would have a raise in the shank just to get it a little bit higher up off the ground. If you go from the center of the hitch pin hole to the edge of the bumper, that's going to be about 5 inches, and you can use that measurement to help figure out that if any folding accessories you might have can be stored in that upright position without hitting the back of your Trax. I do just want to do a quick comparison in regards to the other hitch available, which is a draw tight. And what one I would pick would probably just depend on what I was looking to do. If I knew for a fact I was really only just going to use maybe a small bike rack, for example, I probably would go with the Curt. I think personally it just looks a little bit better than the draw tight. I mean, that's subjective though, it's just my opinion. But if I was wanting to use a little bit larger accessories, in that case, I would probably go with the draw tight, and that's because it's a class 2 hitch, and so it has a little bit higher weight ratings and it's just a little more capable. But at the end of the day, you know, it's just really going to boil down to what you're trying to accomplish. As far as the installation goes, getting the hitch put on, really not too bad. Everything's pretty open and relatively easy to get to, so really shouldn't run into too many issues. If you'd like to see how that's done, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead, pull into the garage, and put the hitch on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here underneath the back of our Trax, and first things first, we need to lower our exhaust down some. It just gives us a lot of extra room to work. So what I'm going to do is take a strap and just kind of run it from side to side. That way when we do let the exhaust down, we can kind of control how fast and how far we let it come down. So we're going to have 2 rubber isolator hangers, one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. You can spray these down with some soapy water, penetrating oil, whatever you got, just to help lubricate them. Then you could take a pry bar or even a big screwdriver and work one of the ends off. So there's that one. I'll do the same thing over on the passenger side here. Once we have both ends off, should be able to loosen up our strap some and let that muffler hang down a little bit. Now we can get some of our hardware in place inside of the frame. We're going to be using this hole as an attachment point. And I want to mention from this point on, anything we do to one side of a vehicle, we're going to do to the other side, so it'll be set up the same. But we're going to take a fish wire and push that through, the coiled end through, and we want it to come out of this larger hole. Now in some cases, you might have to enlarge that hole a little bit. That way you're able to fit a spacer block through there, as well as the head of your carriage bolt. In our case, it actually fits, so I'm not going to bother with it. But if yours doesn't, you could take a file or some type of cutting tool and enlarge that opening a little bit. Just be careful. These are your brake lines here. You obviously don't want to chop into those. But what you're going to do is take your spacer block, put that over. You're going to take a carriage bolt and thread that on. Then you can feed the hardware up into the frame and drop it down. Our other attachment points are going to be on the side of our frame, and depending on your particular vehicle, there can be a few different configurations of what type of hardware we're going to use. In our case, we have some threaded factory weld nuts, and these are coarse thread. The hitch gives you all the different types of hardware that you may need. So you want to definitely try it and see what one's correct. There's also fine thread ones, and then in some cases you might not have weld nuts there at all. They might just be open holes. If they're open holes, you want to use the hardware that we use to get our one bolt through, and that same technique by using your fish wire to pull everything through. Obviously, if you have weld nuts, you want to use some of the bolts, but since ours is coarse thread, we have this the correct bolt. You're going to put on a conical tooth washer. Make sure the teeth on the washer are going to sit like this, so when you screw it in, they're going to face towards the hitch. And it's not a bad idea just to try to kind of get these started by hand. Make sure they go in smooth. You may have to kind of spray some penetrating oil in there and use a brush like this to kind of clean out those threads to make it easier to get. If they're super rusty, you can always use what's called the tap too, and you run that in there, and it essentially kind of recuts the threads and makes it really clean. So that's kind of the worst case scenario, but I figured I'd mention it. But now that we've gone over our hardware combination, we can go ahead and move on to the next step. Over here on the driver's side, this little piece of wheel well liner may interfere with the hitch. So just to be on the safe side, I'm just going to remove a little bit of material. That way we're not fighting it. So I'm just going to kind of cut around here. Just going to use a utility knife and kind of cut it flush. And that should be enough to give us that little bit of extra space that we need. Something you may need to take a look at is on the side here. If you see a bunch of this sealer or caulk kind of built up, you may need to remove some of it, because the hitch is going to slide up like this, and it may affect our attachment points. So what I'm going to do is just take a flathead screwdriver, or you can use a putty knife or whatever you got. Just kind of work my way down and remove some of that. That way it doesn't interfere with us getting the hitch up. So now with the next set of hands, you can get our hitch into position. You want to run your pull wire through that hole and make sure to go up and over your exhaust. Might have to kind of work that hitch in there. But on this side, same deal. You take your wire there, run it through. I'm going to hold it flat, and then I'm going to take my bolts here and get one of them started. Once we get one started on each side, hand tight, the hitch should support itself while we work on the rest of the hardware. Then for this attachment point here, you're going to use a flange nut. Get that started. With all of our hardware in place and hand tight, now we can snug everything down. For this flange nut, I'm going to use an 11/16 size socket. And then for the ones on the side, you can use a 3/4 inch size socket. So once all the hardware is snug, you need to make sure and grab a torque wrench. Come back and torque all the hardware down to the amount specified in the instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can grab one here at eTrailer. A lot of times go to your local auto parts store. They'll have one there available you can rent. Once we have the hitch torqued down, we can raise our exhaust back up into position. So just simply lubricated the hangers again. And this time you can just kind of slide them on by hand. We'll go ahead and get our strap removed. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Curt Trailer Hitch Receiver on our 2019 Chevrolet Trax.